Hi everyone, we'll be starting shortly, but we're still waiting for the third panelist, so let's give us like 2 minutes. Okay, wonderful. Hello everyone, here in the morning. I hope that you've been enjoying the Campus Polska so far. It's not only a place of the inspiring discussions, but also a lot of the friendship-related activities. So I hope that you have actually taken a handful of both of those things so far. We will be discussing in English, so I hope that all of you who are here can understand us, and while asking the questions, we'll do it in English as well. And the whole discussion will be divided into two parts. The first one, that will be the discussion between me and our dear panelists, and in the second part, I will ask you to be more engaging, to ask questions to our panelists. In the end, I assume that the idea of Campus Polska is actually so that you are the part of the discussion, not only the moderator and the panelists. Once again, my name is Bart Kot. I'm the program director of the Warsaw Security Forum. With me here are Vladimir Milov, member of the Russian opposition, a person who was very dedicated and supporter, but also a cooperator with Alexei Navalny, who knew him personally. And I guess a lot of your questions might also be related to that fact. Katarzyna Pisarska, chairwoman of Warsaw Security Forum, Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation, and Sławomir Sierakowski, a well-known journalist, although right now also within the Impact CEE conference, responsible for programming. Also a person who is part of the project Syndicate, if I'm not mistaken. We'll be discussing the idea of the hybrid warfare and also what kind of the threat Russia actually poses to our region, but also more generally to the collective West, of course, and whether this region. We've also seen quite a big swap of prisoners between Kremlin, between the Kremlin and the West. That included also a lot of people who were accused of spying. Those two activities were very close to each other in terms of the timeline, but they show a bit of a different perspective, or how powerful the Kremlin is and how powerful Putin is. So my very first question goes to Vladimir. Vladimir, if you could unpack that for us, which of these two activities, which of those two events tell us more about the situation of Putin right now in the Kremlin, and what was the reaction of the Russian people, not only the policymakers? I mean, we follow the news, but mostly we hear what Putin is saying, not necessarily the Russians themselves.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Very charming setup and also very interesting discussions. I keep watching on YouTube and practicing my understanding of Polish. Clearly, something is in the air and something is changing. I would propose to consider many of those events in a systemic context, because speaking of prisoners exchange, what I heard just like 6 months ago from the Americans and the Germans was that they are ready to negotiate the release of Western nationals and citizens of foreign countries that are being detained in Russia, but not the Russian political prisoners. There was like a no, never, this just won't happen. So clearly there's been a change in the past few months. Another angle is that, like in winter, early spring, when the so-called presidential elections happened in Russia, Putin talked about the war in Ukraine as a perpetual, never-ending, until we reach our goals, which are still mysterious, I think, even to him, what Putin's goals in Ukraine are. But later he changed the rhetoric. He started to speak about the peace talks. That has slightly changed after Ukrainian incursion into Kursk, but this was a great departure. If you are in Russia, if you are a Russian national, if you keep listening to all this stream of messages that is coming, that was a great departure, sometime in May, June. Then this prisoners exchange. Putting also the Kursk situation in the systemic context, I think this exposes the very thing that we Russians have been telling the West, but there was this dominating perception that Putin's resources are infinite. That Russia has 140 million plus people, so it has perpetual manpower for the war in Ukraine. It has not. I think in the past 2-3 weeks, on the 5th, 6th of June, Ukrainians began their operation in Kursk region. It's very clear that Putin does not have the resources, human resources, to fight on many fronts. He can theoretically mobilize more people, but it will take a long time to train them, and it's very clear, if you monitor the situation closely, that these folks that are to be mobilized now will be much less capable and willing to fight than we saw 2 years ago when the first mandatory mobilization started. I mean, I can go on for hours because there's also this economic situation and financial resources being rapidly depleted. We also see Sergei Chemezov, the CEO of Rostech company, the biggest Russian monopolistic arms producer, that essentially eats up about 40% of the total Russian military budget that goes into Rostech pockets. He's saying that military industries are operating near zero profit, and we cannot last much longer that way. That's a quote. And there are many other issues. So I think some sort of a change is in the air. Resources are finite. We can feel it, which means, if I may allow, slightly building a bridge to this discussion about the hybrid warfare. Is it hybrid or is it more kinetic now? Putin's approach is all of the above. He wants to use all available instruments, not even prioritizing anything. Anything that is available at hand, to actually exert pressure on the democratic West and, as he views it, defeat the democratic West. So I think the proper response should be, we also should be using all of the above principle and exert pressure from all sides to continue weakening his system, which has finite resources.
It's actually wonderful that you mentioned this different approach from the Russian side, because this is something which is clearly a difference between the collective West and Russia and Russian tactics, but also strategy in a sense. That Russians, they treat those activities, the hybrid operations, as actually a part of the warfare that is already being conducted against the collective West, not only something which is below the threshold of warfare as such, which actually brings me to the question that I wanted to ask to Katarzyna Pisarska. We're discussing a lot about the defense spending in Europe as a part of a cooperation with the US, especially here in Poland. This is actually a part of a discussion that goes beyond only the budget lines, but also about the core of our foreign policy, if I may say so. The question is, are we really prepared for the activity from the Russian side that goes beyond the hybrid operations? And if so, are there, the other thing is that we discuss a lot about the red lines, always actually mentioning red lines when it comes to the Russia itself. The question would be, are there any red lines for us that would spark the reaction that also goes beyond only the defensive posture?
Thank you very much, Bart, for this question. First of all, I would like to say I'm delighted to be here at the Campus Polska. It's so great to see so many friends, and we're very happy that as the Warsaw Security Forum and the Kazimierz Pułaski Foundation, we can be part of it as a partner. Now, we putting together this panel thought that it's really important that especially young people, such as you, understand what is happening, not only very close to our borders, but truly globally. And for that reason, I personally would actually dump the word hybrid. The word hybrid was very useful when in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine, annexed Crimea, started a war in Donbass, and the West was in disbelief. So when we started to work with Vladimir, I think about that time a decade ago, hybrid was a way of trying to explain to the West that this is war, but short of. People in the West were completely unprepared, and also here in Poland, to talk even about the world war. War was scary. War was something of the past. War was 1939. War was somewhere in Somalia. You know, these were things so and unimaginable that some of our partners actually wanted to believe that little green man invaded Crimea. And it took a lot of time to explain to them that this is a hybrid military operation. Now, move forward 10 years, and we are somewhere else. This is simply war. The question of kinetic and hybrid is only about maybe categorizing different tools of the same thing. But what I fear is that if me and you will not talk about war, we will never prepare ourselves properly to deter war from coming to our countries. And here it brings me to the question that Bart came. Are we prepared? Well, we are only as prepared as you guys are prepared, mentally. The Ukrainians were military non-prepared for war on the 24th of February 2022, although they already were in physical kinetic war with the Russians. But many of our friends, and you probably know a lot of Ukrainians, were absolutely sure that Putin would not come to Kiev. Yes, we had friends we wanted to evacuate because the Americans were saying they will be in Kiev in a matter of weeks. And Ukrainian friends were saying, no, that's not going to happen. That's crazy. How could they do that? I mean, it's impossible. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the capabilities. And yet, that was Putin's goal that he set, and he completed. So they were not prepared, even mentally, but in matters of weeks, because what they've learned through 8 years of fighting with Russia, what they learned about Russia, what they learned about the mentality, maybe Russia, of Putin and the mentality of the regime, made them begin, to defend themselves. And now 2.5 years later, we have full-scale Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region in the Russian Federation, because the Ukrainians understand much better where Putin's red lines are. Our red lines, just like Putin's red lines are shifting, our red lines might also shift. And that's something I fear the most. For now, and I think this is sacrosanct, the red lines are Article 5 of the NATO treaty. So NATO territory, any attack on NATO territory that would be short of a full-scale invasion is a red line for the majority of our NATO for everyone. Yes, if that red line is met, then I am today personally concerned. I personally believe that we would respond very quickly. But again, it's all about the question of societal preparedness. Are we prepared, just like the Ukrainians took all the tools they had, from military to IT tools, to social networks, and really decided to defend their country? That is really what makes us prepared.
Thank you very much for this. We observe, of course, that Russia is waging a total war against Ukraine, not only against Ukrainian armed forces, but also against Ukrainian civilians. That also means that we should actually be building a potentially total defense approach. That means what you actually said, the whole of society response to the potential threat from the Russian side. That brings me actually to Sławek. Prime Minister Tusk is talking a lot about the fact that we live in the pre-war times. But what does it mean for the democratic society that is currently not under the direct attack from the Russian side? Is there a way to actually to bridge this military civilian division that usually there is in the democratic societies, because of the division of power, because of the division of budget, and actually how to build a democracy that is strong, that is responsible, that is capable of responding to these threats, but that do not cross the line of the state that is omnipresent in a sense.
I believe that I should sing here my answer.
The party starts.
Yeah, but I can't sing, I'm sorry. Well, to answer your question, actually you took us by surprise because you put it hybrid in the title and in the same time you just overturn it as an, so it's, but I would defend this notion, not really about the war, but about the peace. Because the way I understand the Western approach, when they are talking about like we should defend Ukraine, we're gonna support it as long as it takes, but they never say we have to win with Russia. So what they're talking about really is a hybrid peace with Russia. So this is one thing. Another thing is, and this is why Tusk is talking about pre-war times, because he's pushing the West to stop thinking about a hybrid peace and start thinking about the regular peace. The second, of course, is the question of the readiness, how far we can go, who will fight. It's not, I think, about democracy vis-a-vis authoritarian states, because I think authoritarian states are a little bit more prepared because they can push and they can just forget about whether like people will die or not, which actually is our problem. We are much more fragile. But if you look at the surveys, when they ask in a very simple way, like who's gonna fight, will you fight for your country? The numbers are horrible. I remember what was before the war. And you can divide Europe into three camps. The Western Europe don't want to fight. If you ask Germans, Dutch people, it was less than 20% of people declaring the readiness to fight, which means pretty much nobody. I mean, the only really prepared countries were Northern Europe, and the numbers are between 50 and 70. And if you know Finland, they are prepared, they are physically prepared, infrastructurally prepared. They really know how to fight. They never forgot about what is Russia, and they were building houses, building roads, building pretty much everything to have the ready infrastructure to defend themselves. Then you have two other countries in Eastern Europe, Russia and Ukraine, when the readiness was above 50%. I'm not sure whether I can agree that Ukraine was not prepared and even informed about the war, because Americans were informed. Zelensky was constantly saying, no worries, the war will not come to Kiev, to avoid panic. Because if you're going to have panic in Ukraine, then you will stop having economy working, society being like a normal society. You wanted to avoid much bigger immigration from Ukraine. So this was the reason. This was a little bit like a propaganda that Ukraine is using, which is nothing like, there is nothing wrong in it. Propaganda is a part of politics. So this was pretty much normal, and I think he was right to do it this way. I also know that he was not even discussing, but arguing with Americans, especially those Americans that were openly talking that the war is coming and like scaring people in Ukraine. But Ukrainians were fighting, or had been fighting 10 years. If you were watching Ukrainian news in, let's say, 2016, 2018, it started with what was going on the front line. First 5 minutes was like who died, how many people died, what is like, I mean, and then comes what is going on in Ukraine, foreign news, sport, etc., etc. So I believe that mentally they were prepared, and also to a certain extent militarily, but of course they had no missiles. They had javelins. They had Bayraktars, which was pretty much everything that they could get from, by the way, Trump, which is another paradox. So that would be my answer. I think hybrid peace is something that we should consider as an important issue.
But it touches at some point the issue of fear. Actually, Kasia was rightfully mentioning that we are right now discussing a very kinetic threat, a very direct threat, which automatically sparks some fear, especially in the democratic societies. The question here, Sławek, because I want to follow with you, the question here is how to use this fear, because it is there, it is already in the society, in the collective West, that there is a fear against some kind of a direct confrontation with Russia. But how to use that fear not to demobilize societies, but to create a political narrative pretty much similar to what actually the Prime Minister here in Poland is doing right now, that would actually mobilize people to become more prepared. We are observing it here in Poland, but how could that be better suited for the Western audiences?
The way to avoid panic is to prepare your society. If you look at Russia, what is the main message from Russian soldiers and even families of the soldiers? You're putting us on the front line unprepared. We have we are not armed properly. We have no, jackets. We have no just basic equipment. They're not saying don't put us on front line. They're saying prepare us first, and then we can fight. So I think that it's not only about arm ourselves, but also to arm It comes with a certain message to the society. But of course you can formulate this message and you can reach people with this message. So I believe that this cannot be like a propaganda of the former government. Well, we are buying pretty much everything from the shelf, Korean shelf, American shelf. You have to make one more step further to reach people with that, to explain how people would be prepared if something would break out in Poland.
I can see that Kasia already.
I'm just thinking because one thing that really shows the stakes is a simple question and a kind of raise of hands. If Poland, and I assume the majority of you here come from Poland, all of your country, but let's say Poland is attacked tomorrow by Russia in a full-scale invasion. Let's say Russia enters Poland not far from here, from Królewiec.
Belarus, because we are referring to Russia
absolutely.
right now.
Belarus is also considered by us as hostile territory where Russians not only stationed their forces, but also nuclear power. So if Russia actually invades tomorrow from Królewiec or from Belarus, how many of you would join the Polish army? Yeah? And this is really the discussion we should start having. 6 people?
Because we are also allowed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm just, this is actually the discussion I would really like to have with you guys here in Campus Polska. Those of you who said, I would not, anybody could raise their hand and say why not?
There is a lady in the yellow hoodie.
Yeah, we would love to hear you.
Okay, that was...
Okay, yeah. I understand. Maybe I'll reframe. If your country was attacked, would you join your army? Okay, a little more. Okay.
That's better.
How many of you would not join the army?
So there are people.
Okay. So, and would you share with us why not? Could we have a mic here in front?
Okay, I just think that I don't want to die for politics. I'm young, I got whole life ahead. And joining army, going on a war is like without experience means like it's so probably that I will die. And I will be just the guy that has to do some moves to help army prepare better attack, and we are just the people on the first line. So I just don't want to die that way.
Thank you. A very important voice. Another one. If we could have the mic there.
Thank you. For me, it's not the question if I join, but for me, it's the question, how can I help? Because that's the question. I'm not aware how my skills, my capabilities can be useful for the army, and how can I support.
This is actually a very good argument, because we also had a separate discussion when I participated, when we actually discussed the total defense concept, and actually that was raised by some people, that not everyone and not every single citizen would be obliged to serve in the armed forces. There are other options, there are other activities, but we are not offering it at this point. And we should be probably discussing that a lot. We'll bring the questions from the audience in a second, but I also want to use the fact that Vladimir is here with us. And actually, there's a small experiment that Kasia conducted, which is also quite significant when it comes to the discussion here. But you also have the perspective from the Russian side, where probably this same question being asked to the youngsters would be a bit different. And this is like very much linked to what we discussed before mounting the stage. So, because we're talking about the response from the Russian state in terms of these red lines, I will refer to this concept. But is there a red line after which, when it's being crossed, it won't be only the Kremlin's response, but it will be actually the Russian mobilization around the idea of the homeland security, etc., etc. I'm talking about this because I assume that this is also a very delicate issue for you as a person who is a member of the opposition. How to actually discuss with Russians about the threat that is caused to their own homeland, at the same time demobilizing them against the Kremlin.
It is not a difficult question because we keep discussing this quite openly with the Russian audience, and we Russians in exile, we have multi-million audience through YouTube and social media in Russia, and you can watch it if you speak and understand Russian. You can actually watch these very difficult conversations. I would say a few things. Most Russians, disregard of propaganda, they actually get it, that this is not a just war for some patriotic cause, but this is an imposed war, imposed by mafia dictatorship whose interests do not align with those strategic national interests of the Russian people. People may not admit it openly, but I mean, let's generalize. Most Russians generally get it. And there are several issues which can prove that. First, there's been a rapid increase of fees offered for signing a contract with Russian Ministry of Defense to actually go and fight. When the full-scale invasion broke out, they offered, let me say it in rubles for general understanding, 200,000 initial one-time pay for signing a contract. They are offering more than 2 million now. If you are a market analyst and somebody says that the price for something has grown more than 10 times in just 2 years, are there many people lining up to go and die even for a really very generous pay? Because this is bigger than the median salary in most Russian regions by order of magnitude, this kind of pay. No lines, no people showing up. So I would say this idea of patriotic mobilization is greatly exaggerated. We can also watch the reaction to Ukrainian incursion in Kursk, because there's a blame game. Why Russian men are fleeing Kursk? Why are they not joining the fight for their homeland? And some other people saying, oh, but you're accusing them on social media, why you yourselves not lining up to the fight? So I would say there would be maybe even lesser proportion if Russians are being asked this question.
Thank you. Okay, that was the first part.
Yeah, I would just add, I think this is also Russia's huge weakness in this war. The type of passiveness of Russian citizens, where they even feel that Kursk is so far away. This is really not us. This is not our problem. This is a regional problem. Let the region deal with the fact it has to deal with a military incursion into its territory. But this can also be our strength. And I think one of the huge things that politicians, but also educators in our country, and not only in our country, in the West, have to do to realize what is at stake. Because you said, and rightly so, I know a lot of people think like you. It's a political thing. I'm not going to die for some military purposes and so on. But you're not dying for a general. You're not dying for a politician. You're dying that your city, what city do you come from? From Wrocław. You're dying for Wrocław not to be bombed as Kiev is today, with 60 shahads and missiles, with people fleeing into the metro, with civilians being killed, with energy infrastructure being destroyed, with the inability to have a proper life, not even only fly out of your country whenever you want, or or do business or educate and so on. So I think when we realize that, and this is something that the war in Ukraine has brought much more here to Poland. It has brought much less into Portugal, Spain, even France, because they're so far away. But it kind of sparked our imagination what today's war looks like, and that we're not fighting for some generals, for some politicians. We're fighting for our cities. We're fighting for our families. We're fighting for this type of lifestyle that we have been able to create in this country, and the type of freedoms that we have been able to attain in the last 4 decades. And I think this is extremely pronounced here in Poland. So I would just leave it with that, but we have to remember, again, the war is in our minds. It's in the Russian minds, and it's not doing very well there. The question is, how is it doing in ours? Are we ready to defend? And in order for us not to have to defend Poland, we have to do everything that Ukraine wins today. The Ukrainian victory is the essence of our victory in the future.
And I would not only subscribe to that, but even reframe it in a sense that you're not dying for Wrocław, you're winning for Wrocław, because that is also about the perception of the threat and what is the aim. It is to win, not to die for your country. Let me close this part of our discussion. What I take from it is that actually we should not be focusing on hybrid operations anymore. We should be rather talking about the very direct, sometimes very kinetic threat from the Russian side. There is fear, it exists, but we should be actually use it for mobilizing our societies, not necessarily demobilizing our societies. The discussion that we are already having with the public also shows how much we should be reacting to this fear among the public. But I also take from what Vladimir said that pretty much the same narratives, pretty much the same things are in the minds of the Russian society, and we should also take that in account while actually formulating our strategy, how to counter Russia, how to change Russia maybe in the future. Okay. Please raise your hands. I will be pointing to people, but once you ask the question, please introduce yourself and then ask the question whether that's general or to one of the panelists. Yeah, we'll be taking 2 in a row. The lady with the yellow hoodie, and then the gentleman in the yellow hoodie as well.
Thank you very much. My name is Margarita Bliznyuk. I'm from Kharkiv, from Ukraine, and that's why I would allow myself to contribute to the discussion on whether people should or should not join the army. As far as I subscribe 100% for the fact that mobilization and making people aware why is it important to defend their own homeland is important. What Ukrainian example showed also is that it is important to keep people in country working as they did before the war, meaning to economy to run, for the businesses to work, for people to pay taxes that then will go to the army, right? And then will help the country to win this war. So I think that it it is very important to know how you can help and where is your place that you can contribute the most to the war. Well, the question I'd like to ask is probably for Kasia, as it is about the let's say, European security architecture generally, and the long-term implications that we can observe maybe in the potential future if Russia continues escalating in the region. Should it be hybrid threats or kinetic threats? And also, could it have any kind of implications for the collective defense in Europe and the potentially permanently changing the approach to this collective defense? Thank you.
Thank you. Could you pass the mic to your friend? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Arsen, Wrocław University, Szkoła Doktorska. So actually I have a, not probably a question, but a statement. Even
but a
when
short
this
one. Keep it short.
panel, yes, for sure, started, we named this like Putin's war, Putin's society, and etc. I think it's a bit delusional, right? We need to be honest. That's this war of Russian society, and it's important to recognize that because Russians are manufacturing these rockets. These rockets that today, like an hour ago, just landed on the hydraulic electric station in Kyiv, and we need to be changing our mind and perception of this. Vladimir, you mentioned that Russian opposition has a wide range, like multi-million YouTube channels and etc. And YouTube is now slowed in Russia. And I think that even if Russians not protesting the war right now, but they protesting that they don't have electricity because of the consequences that Ukraine responds and also striking some.
I will start with a short reflection.
Please keep short the question because there are a lot of people.
The question will be addressed to Kasia because in Polish there is a saying that każdy kij ma dwa końce. Every stick has two endings. And we talk about our readiness for going to war, about fighting in the war, as we saw like a couple of minutes before during the experiment, like there are many people who don't want to go to war. And the thing is, and this is probably an open question, and I think that everyone will be probably able to answer that, whether we as a society, and I come from Warsaw, I didn't say that, are we as a society mentally prepared for such thing? Because to be honest, I am very concerned about that. Even if we have a war, like a couple of hundreds of kilometers from here in Ukraine, and we have a Królewicz region, like 100 kilometers from here, are we aware that such situation can happen? Because we are right now talking about the pre-war era, not after the war, after the Second World War, but potential pre-war era. Thank you.
Okay, so Kasia, first question was to you, and I assume the gentleman's reaction was also referring to you. So please start, then the gentleman.
So first, I fully agree with you as you started, and I think I will have to in the future reframe my question. I'll have to ask who's ready to stay in the country and not flee it when the war comes. I think that is the proper question we should be asking ourselves. And whatever potential, as you saw, I mean, the economy of Ukraine today is in a difficult condition, but there's so many enterprises. There's so much innovation, especially, of course, in the military realm, but not only happening today. And thanks to this, Ukraine is surviving day for day, month for month. So absolutely, I think this is the question we should be asking ourselves. Do we care enough about the life we have here? Do we care enough about the cities we live in, the communities we are part of, our families, to stay here and fight? And I think this is the honest discussion. And then we can talk about how many Abrams and Bradleys and HIMARSes and everything else we're buying and who's operating them. And I'm happy to get into that discussion too, because I do specialize in it. But I see this is not the problem. Yeah, the question: who's going to be behind that struggle? So you asked me about the European security architecture and Russia's readiness to go into war. And here we go into the hybrid question, an important hybrid question. You've seen what Russia is doing. Yes, in the last few months, it has really intensified its hybrid, if you want to use this word, attacks on the Western societies. These are not only cyber attacks. These are not only, infrastructural attacks. This is arson attacks. This is poisoning, for now, still Russian opposition figures, but not only. More and more is happening. We just heard that there was a supposed attack against the Russian the German head of intelligence services. Yes. So basically, they are now trying to kill our own citizens who pose certain threats to them. So they're moving further and further. Is that changing the way we are starting to react? Well, I personally see that a lot of the Western elites have truly transformed their understanding of Russia over these 2 years. And what Putin is trying to do with these attacks is to threaten both the elites and the societies, but it's not really working that much. Do you think Macron is going to just forget what has been done around the Olympics with the train system? I mean, we all know Russians were behind that, yeah? It just destroyed 1 day of communication in France. Do you think now France is more willing to talk with Putin or less willing to talk with Putin? What kind of, advantage does that bring? So I think Putin is also misunderstanding us. Just like the West misunderstands Putin, that we think that there's, magical red lines where nuclear war will start. If you just enter Russian territory tomorrow, bombs will flee around. Well, the Ukrainians are in Kursk. And what? Nothing, yeah? So I think, we misunderstand Putin. He also misunderstands us. I feel that in many countries, there's more and more opposition, especially in Europe, against what Putin is doing. My, of course, main concern is the United States of America today, because this is the main player who will determine how this war will end. Not only because of its might in general, but most importantly, the United States of America has the majority of military capabilities that can be transferred quickly to Ukraine, and has the political decision that allows Ukraine to strike targets within Russian territory, and they have very limited ability to do that for now. So I hope that answers your questions at this a bit, and I'll stop here.
Swaig was waving to me, willing to answer the question.
I'll take this one about whose war is it? Like whether it's
yes, of course.
Putin's war or Russian war. Well, Putin is a pure creature of Russian culture. Like his main advisors are Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. I mean, probably Stalin even. So, and even when you study Russian culture, Russian history, Putin comes on the last page, right? I understand those people like Adam Michnik who are talking about Putin's war, not Russian war. Intentions are good. And I would even say that politics behind this question is good. Adam used to say that democracy is possible in China. If it's possible in Taiwan, it probably is possible in China. The intention is like, we have to find a partner there because Russia will stay there, right? So, like with Catholic Church in Poland, okay, we won't erase it. So if they're gonna be a partner, like like a liberal opposition in Russia, let's save some place for that, all right? But I think there is a better test for what Russians think, what's their attitude. Not that they're not protesting in Russia, or they're protesting only that the electricity is off, right? There are a lot of Russians outside of Russia, millions. Do they protest? But they won't go to prison, right? Okay. I haven't seen in Berlin, in Paris, in London, people like Russian people protesting. It's pure, it's safe, it will save the face of Russia. There is no better occasion to protest when you're Russian, right? My friend Masha Gessen, I asked her whether Russian immigration is the first immigration that would be anti-regime, but also anti-imperialist. Because when if you take Solzhenitsyn, if you take Brodsky, if you take other best representatives of Russian opposition, and you will drink vodka with them, after 200 grams, they will say, great Russia, huge culture, best, literature, we're big, etc., right? So, I would feel much safer about it's not Poland or like me myself. I can defend myself, but I would look differently on Russia if I would see first generation of Russian immigration that would stop talking about great Russia, big Russia. Check out the poem that Brodsky wrote about Ukraine, right? He never published it. That's good, because he was, pushed by Czesław Miłosz, Adam Michnik, and other people not to publish this one. And Solzhenitsyn, what was his biography? So, we should talk to Russian immigration, and we should check it or discuss it, because there are 3 levels. To stop being imperialist, then to fight for liberalism, and then at the end is democracy. All right. So let's make a first step with Russian immigration.
Before I go back to the public, we cannot pass this question without the response from the side of the Russian opposition here.
Sorry, I have to make a small correction, because Catherine the Great was not Russian. She was 100% ethnic German. Sophia.
Yeah, and Stalin was Georgian, and there were no Russian leaders ever.
In the last 250 years, the first actually fully ethnic Russian leader was Boris Yeltsin, the only one, who fully recognized our neighbors in the 1991 internationally recognized borders, which we all support officially for many years. This is actually what we fought for. When we were also protesting at the Bolotnaya Square, where another ethnic Russian, Emelian Pugachev, was quartered by Catherine the Great because he fought against her. So that's Russian culture is not as easy to understand sometimes as
I hope it's a joke, because then Hitler was Austrian, not German, and
this is a very serious point, because when we narrow down all these serious discussions to tribalistic lines, sometimes it's not good and not helpful to really understand what is going on. That's my general point. Now, on this issue about whether this is Putin's war or Russia's war, I think we might as well drop this debate, because this is irrelevant and distracting, because both points are right in their own way. Yes, there is a significant part of Russian society which supports this war, significant. But also at the same time, this war was clearly imposed. Take a look at the pre-war polls. Nobody wanted this war. Before Russian annexation of Crimea, around 65% of Russians, according to polls, supported full territorial integrity of Ukraine in 1991 borders. And I can go on for hours explaining this. People who protest for the lack of electricity, they are being suppressed just the same as those who protest the war. About 40,000 detentions have happened in the 40,000 detentions happened in the last 2.5 years of people protesting against the war. That's bigger than protests for the lack of electricity by order of magnitude. So let's not simplify. We do have a part in our country which is imperialistic. That's not the biggest part of the society. It's just amplified by the state propaganda, so you might feel like it's the biggest. It is not. There was a Pew Research poll 4 years ago which shows that Russia is by far not the biggest country in Europe by terms of the share of population who thinks that parts of other countries belong to them. Hungary is, with nearly 70%. And Russia is way below that. So, again, we have a problem. We do understand that, and we try to combat that. I can explain this in more detail if you want. But, let's not narrow it down to some tribalistic cultural lines. It's wrong. It's a global war of freedom versus authoritarian vision of a world dominated by a few mafias. So it's, again, I think narrowing down to tribalistic lines is wrong.
Where's Russian opposition protest in Europe?
Sorry?
Where is Russian opposition protest in Europe? You have full liberty. Why you do nothing?
Nothing?
Yes.
Haven't you watched? I can send you a couple of links with mass demonstration of Russians across Europe by many occasions.
Send me.
With Ukrainian flag. I will. So, folks, sorry. This might sound unpleasant, but I have to say it. Before you accuse Russian opposition of something, actually pay attention to what is actually happening. Learn the facts.
Okay, gentlemen, please.
Just one sentence.
Still, there is.
We love Russian opposition. I cooperate with Russian opposition. I know pretty much everybody from Russian opposition. What we are talking about with my friend in Ukraine is the Russian society. You have 100,000 Russians, millions of Russians in Europe and outside of Europe. We don't see any demonstrations at all. At all.
A quick
it
reaction.
Should be 100,000 Russians in Berlin.
May I ask a question? Do you see many demonstrations in countries like Eritrea, Turkmenistan? By all international rankings, Freedom House, Reporters Without Borders, Russia is within like 15, 20 most despotic countries in the world.
So we should expect from Russian society what we expect from Eritrea? You sure?
Sorry, we had several dozen thousand people detained officially, that's documented, and at the rallies protesting the war in Ukraine.
Well, Vladimir, I mean, I understand your points. I guess everyone actually understood your arguments from both sides. There is no need of repeating them because I guess that the points were taken from both sides. I see that we won't agree on this, but there are questions still from the audience. Pani Ministrze, pan... Yeah. Excuse me.
My flat happens to be opposite the Russian embassy in London, and I've seen very big Russian demonstrations against the war. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the point. Lady in the back.
Thank you. My name is Mariam from Warsaw, and I have a question for Mr. Milov. Is there anything that could have happened on this war to Russian people fully turn off from Vladimir Putin? And the second quick question, what already changed in mentality of Russian society during the invasion? Thank you.
And gentlemen here. I will take one more.
So I'm gonna get maybe a bit controversial in here. Because you, madam, conducted the survey about who would join the army and who would not. And as you see, the results were a bit poor, to be honest. But I would like to touch the issue that of the fact that we in Poland have a constitutional rule of the equality of sexes. And as me being 18 and seeing people my age dying in Ukraine, I would say that I would ask you, gentlemen and madam, how can we guarantee such equality in the times of war? And I would say that I personally see my role in the army and I know what would I do, and I would stay here for sure. But I think the part of this reluctance that we all noticed to join the army, I guess is also the part of reluctance of my friends sitting in here, is that we are much more legally obligated to defend it, and it's Poland is as mine and as it belongs to my friends sitting here.
Okay.
And yeah.
So the question is about the equality of sexes when it comes to the obligation to defend the homeland.
How to do it.
How to do it. One more here in the center.
Thank you. Daniel Wyszecki, I'm from Germany, and I follow the discourses in Poland and Germany for a while now. And I have to say, unfortunately, that way too many people that are in Germany just indifferent to Ukrainian suffering. But I have a few friends of mine whose hearts are in the right place, but they are genuinely they fear the escalation of a nuclear war. And I understand and I can explain to them that Russia right now doesn't have the interest to escalate nuclear. But could you comment on a situation in which there might be a situation where Russia would use nuclear deterrence?
Nuclear escalation. Thank you. Kasia, first one to you.
Very quickly, with everyone who comes from the West and talks about nuclear, I take them for an exercise. what would happen? I mean, what kind of value for the Putin regime would have using today a tactical nuclear war? Yeah, because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking full-scale. Washington is, that's the end of the world. Yeah, we're far from that. I don't think nobody in the security areas is talking about that. Tactical nuclear war. It has zero value at the moment in terms of military, because you can do a lot of damage, using conventional weapons. But it would alienate Russia from its key allies, including China and India. And when there was this sable rattling a year ago where Putin was saying, oh, I'm going to use nuclear if you don't, if you continue arming Ukraine, it was the Chinese who came to Putin and said, because using a nuclear warhead in such a regional conflict changes the entire world as we know it. It opens up a Pandora box where all of a sudden Pakistan can use a bomb against India, where India can use a bomb against China, when Israel can use a bomb, well, I don't know against whom, because it's pretty much locked. But you understand, this is a red line not only for the West, but it is a red line for the entire world. And last thing, and this is CIA former director David Petraeus talking, he once commented, if Russia uses the nuclear warhead in Ukraine, on Ukrainian territory, yes? There is already a ready plan to take down Putin. That the United States said very clearly it will take down the entire Black Sea fleet, it will take down Putin, it will not use nuclear, but it will destroy the regime overnight. And the Russians know it. So this is not a real fear, in terms of this is not the thing we should be considering. There's a lot of things we should be much more worried about, including Ukrainian victory and what's happening today in Donetsk.
We started 5 minutes later, so I guess we still have 5 minutes. Vladimir?
A very quick take on the nuclear. I fully agree with Kasia that there's no advantage of using a tactical nuclear weapon, zero. And as far as strategic nuclear confrontation is concerned, Rogozin, one of the functionaries of the Putin's regime, 11 years ago, before the annexation of Crimea, he given a lecture where there was a famous line widely quoted in Russia, Russia would lose a war to America in 6 hours because they're going to simply destroy our potential with high-precision strikes. And they know it. They're fully aware. On the question of when Russians will turn on Putin, the key part here is turn on how? When you have a totally armed military and security apparatus and fully disarmed, scared people with no instrumentarium how to take on this regime, in the past quarter of a century, Putin is in power for 25 years now. He's been deliberately depoliticizing and disengaging the Russian society. So what happens to Russian society now is there a war going on around you, but you are locked in the cage. So question number one is how to get out of the cage. It's not an easy. This is why, not out of simple rhetoric, but this is why I was referring to places like Eritrea or Turkmenistan. They don't like it there, but they're not protesting not because they like their regimes, because they lack instrumentarium. I see a lot of people living in democracy thinking about Russian society like they live pretty much in the same environment, they just have to want to protest. No, it is not a question of want. It is a question of disproportion in tools of influence, with all of the 100% of hard power, very brutal hard power, being on the side of Putin's regime. Now, the question of when, it's really shifting big time. Opinion polling would tell you that there's a 2-to-1 ratio among Russians who want to end the war now through negotiations versus continuing it, which is about a third. Yes, this is the very loud third that exists. It's big. This is what you hear. This is why I think that all Russian society is like that. So the trends in opinion polling are there. I would say, comparing this to what happened in the 80s in the Soviet Union collapse, this will not be just one event. Economic difficulties, Prigozhin's revolt, or Ukrainian incursion in Kursk. All of these things will keep mounting discontent while the system will be getting weaker. There will be some breaking point in future. We don't know when, but in the 80s it was all together. Economy, Afghanistan, Chernobyl will be pretty much the same now, so we have to continue pushing from all fronts to actually reach this breaking point and make sure that these fatigue cracks will crack open?
Short comment from the Slovak side.
Vladimir, don't take us as a stupid Russophobes. Believe me, like, at least, well, I can give you really a lot of proofs that that we are very willing to cooperate with the Russian opposition. I'm personally caring about some Russian refugees still, which is not an easy thing in Poland. But your argument about Eritrea doesn't work. We, as Poland, were locked in the cage after 1945. We were depoliticized the way you understand it. We were a part of Russia or a satellite of Russia for more than a century, and we were protesting, fighting constantly, right? So, of course, I know Russian history. I studied it for 20 years. I know how Russian society is passive to the extent of like eternity, right? So there are explanations that are much more sophisticated, but I don't buy this like simple thing that Russian people are just, it's like a clay that you can, form the way you want. I mean, I think I have better, I would say, opinion about Russian society than you. I think they have much more will, but they just don't use it.
Sławek, Vladimir, I mean, point taken. The next discussion here we'll be organizing will be about the Russian opposition democracy and how...
We had once, last year, such a discussion
we have
between the Ukrainians and the Russian opposition.
Yes,
it was bloody. But last word, first, we
comment.
did not answer one
the
question.
Inclusiveness. Yes.
But I promise at 5 o'clock today we have a panel on the main arena with Rafał Trzaskowski and Deputy Minister of Defense Cezary Tomczyk. I'm a moderator. I will ask them this question, okay? I think that they will be the best people to answer this. And second, I would like to thank you, all of you, for caring. I think I can't underline how important it is that you come to panels like this, think about what's happening in the East, and want to make, to really fight regimes like the Putin regime and support the Ukrainians who really deserve our support today. So thank you so much.
And that was the panel discussion in partnership with the Warsaw Security Forum, Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation. Thank you very much. Join me in thanking our panelists. And thank you for being here with us and asking wonderful questions. I hope you'll enjoy Campus Polska and, catch our speakers
See you around.
Yeah, thank you.